Ever had your loop performance completely fall apart because your volumes were all over the place? Well, I have, and let me tell you, it's not a lot of fun. In this video, I'm going to be giving you a detailed walkthrough of how I cured my volume chaos and finally got my mixer inside Loopy Pro under control. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to Loop with Jack. Let me tell you a story about the moment that I realized I really needed to get better control of my volume levels inside of Loopy Pro. So back about 12 months ago, it was one of my first gigs trying out Loopy Pro. I was really excited to give it a go. I found this new amazing app with all these possibilities. I layered up all kinds of different plugins, channel strips, VSTs, drum samples, all of the usual stuff that everybody does when they get Loopy Pro. But quickly, within the first song, when I was starting to layer things up, I quickly realized that I should have given this a lot more thought. My volumes were all over the place. I recorded some guitar, went to sing over it, and the volume from my microphone was not quite right. So I started to adjust it on the fly, messing with all my settings. Then that was working nice. I bring in a synth later on, which was just way too hot and almost blew the speakers up. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I really should have thought this through a little better. So that kind of led me down this path and made me come up with a little bit of a gain staging structure that I'm sharing with you today in the hope that it can help you overcome any problems you may face when matching different levels from different sources inside Loopy Pro. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is think about our input level going into the iPad, so through your audio interface. In my case, that is this RME Babyface Pro FS. And this particular audio interface has its own piece of software for the iPad. So I can go in and set my levels there, which I'll do in a second. But just a quick note, if you don't have software with your audio interface that's iOS compatible, then you'd need to copy these steps using the mixer inside of Loopy Pro and monitoring your levels there. So this is Total Mix Effects from RME, and it comes with my audio interface. And it's just like any other typical mixer, but you can see the input currently from my microphone on channel 1 here. And just up the channel, underneath the mute and solo icon, you can see the level coming in. Now at the moment I'm talking, so it's relatively quiet, but I usually set this kind of looking for around minus 12 dBFS, just to kind of set the levels nice and consistently. So if I just go 1, 2, you can see that we're kind of getting up to that minus 12 range. You can do the same for, say, an electric guitar. This is my electric guitar. The sound you're hearing, by the way, is coming from Loopy Pro, but this is just going to be the dry sound going into this. So if I play my guitar, you can see if I really hit it, it's going to come up to maybe minus 11, minus 12. So these two sources right now are both coming in looking for minus 12, and they're matching quite nicely before we get going. Now the target I'm looking for is minus 12 dBFS, and then maybe settling down to around minus 18 when you're just playing the average kind of volume that you need. Hopefully it goes without saying, but you certainly don't want to see any red flashes here. You don't want any of the channels to be peaking or getting anywhere near distorting, which is why we're trying to leave enough headroom so that we can play around a little bit in Loopy Pro in a moment, but we want to leave it around that minus 12 mark the best you can. Now, if like me, you're using a similar setup each time, such as a microphone and an electric guitar, and I always use the same mic in this room and I use the same guitar with the same pickups, then it's quite handy to save a snapshot or a preset of the entire mixer if the software allows you to do that. That way I can simply just load this up every time and I know I'm good to go. I'm crazy. is to think about controlling volume inside of Loopy after you have already set up your input gain. Now to do this, I like to use a loudness meter. The one we're going to be using today is called Ulean LM Lite, if I'm pronouncing that right. And it's a free plugin that you can download in the App Store. Now this particular meter is giving us some different metrics to think about. There's LUFS, which is basically perceived loudness. We've also got true peak max and then integrated. Now the integrated kind of, if you play your guitar, say for 10 to 15 seconds, it will give you the average LUFS over that time. So it's a really handy little scale to look at when you want to try and maybe play a drum beat for a few seconds and see what the average volume is going to be. Now, why are we monitoring the volume of our channels if we've already done it coming into Loopy Pro? Well, pretty much every effect, plugin, or maybe even like an amp sim on your guitar is going to drastically change the volume. So you need to make sure you're properly gain staging so that when you go through this plugin chain, at least at the end of that plugin chain, you kind of know how loud it's going to be. Because otherwise, we've set our volumes on the way in, you stick an amp sim on and suddenly it's raging hot and it's nowhere near matching the vocal mic, which is going to lead to problems down the line. Also, if you start to create kind of presets and signal chains, by doing it this way, making sure the input is the way we want it, and also the output of the channel is the way we want it, we know that when we add different plugins over time, they're going to start to react in a similar way or how we would expect them to. So I put this loudness meter on the master bus effects pre-fader section. And the reason I put it there is I can then just solo any of my channels and get a reading of what it's saying without having to put on every individual channel as a single effect. Once I'm done balancing my different channels, then I can just disable this. So let's take a look at what the guitar looks like using the loudness meter. So let's open the loudness meter. And for the purposes of this video, you're going to hear my microphone as well as my guitar, which isn't ideal, but normally I would just simply be strumming the guitar and mute the microphone, but I'll leave it on for now. So you can press this red X to reset the loudness meter. And I've got Tone Stack Pro going on my electric guitar right now. So when I play, you can see what we're reading. So if I play a chord, at the moment you can see it's hovering around -28 LUFS for the integrated reading. So I'm just going to reset that and start hitting the guitar a little louder. So there you can see we're kind of hovering around -22, -23, and that seems to be the number that I am using for each of my channels. Now you can adjust that, of course, but I found that works pretty well for me across the board. I'm using that on my drums, on little bass samples, some synths, etc., and just managing my way through each channel, knowing that it's hovering between -20 and kind of -23, depending on what I'm after. Now, one bonus tip here, you'll notice that all of my faders across the mixer are still at unity, at 0. And I could have adjusted the output volume of each channel at this point going into my meter reading using that fader. But I like to use the plugin, or at least the last plugin in the chain, to control the overall volume of that channel, get close to this -22 LUFS reading that I'm after, and then I've still got the fader which I can use live to fine tune things as we go. It just keeps things nice and clean. So I've got this drum pad, and let's see what kind of reading we're getting on our loudness meter. So again, let's open up the meter. And if I play a couple of these drums, most likely badly, we can get an idea of what kind of LUFS reading we're getting for the drum pad and see if we need to adjust. Let's just reset again. So hopefully you can see that that's falling in the range that I am after, this -20 to -23 kind of range. So we know that the drums and the guitar are going to sit pretty well together in the mix. Now once you go through this setup, you'll start to get consistent volumes for each channel no matter what plugins you use. And this means that when you start recording to your different clips or colors, everything is going to be pretty under control, and then everything's just going to need maybe some fine tweaking when you get to it. This really removes the stress when you're performing live and stops you trying to ride loads of different faders on the fly. Now at this point, I like to turn the LUFS meter off as it's no longer needed. And I save these presets, and all the typical channels then always have the same gain staging, unless I start to mess with plugins, and then I'll redo this process. Because of the way Loopy Pro works, you've got your volume going into Loopy, you've then got your volume coming out of the channels. You then can record to clip colors and group those colors. So we also need to think about the volume level of colors themselves. Now, even though we've gain staged our different channels, you're still going to come into a few little problems when you record multiple things to, say, the purple group or the orange group. For example, if you've just got one guitar part on the purple group and then you layer up 5 or 6 different vocal harmonies, inevitably that's going to start to play back and feel louder and have more energy than the other one. So what I like to do just to control this is just have a slider on screen so that if I need to just quickly bring down the vocals, for example, I can do that. Now, another consideration is although we've matched everything around the same sort of volume, I want my vocals to then sit above the mix. So what I like to do is match everything, push the vocal volume up a little bit using the main fader, and then I bring down the overall volume of the vocal group. In this case, it's this pink color here. So that means when I'm singing, it's going to sit above the mix, and then when I record to the vocal group, that vocal group will play back and I'll just take a little bit of that volume away to compensate. So now my pink group, or like vocal loops or harmonies, will play back at a pretty much the same volume as my drums and other elements. Some key takeaways from this. This isn't an exact science. I'm sure there are plenty of audio engineers out there who are probably laughing at me right now in terms of the way I've gain staged this, but it works for me. It just means I always know a volume level that I'm going to be trying to get when I come into my audio interface. I also know the type of volume I want after I've done my effects processing inside a Loopy Pro. And then from there, I could just have fun and enjoy the looping process without having to worry too much about my volumes. Now, don't forget that every sound behaves differently. Certain frequencies are more jarring on the ear, so you might have a really high-pitched sound that still cuts through the mix too much for you, even though you've gain staged it and matched it to what you want. So always use your ears and adjust it to what suits you. But I find that sometimes my ears aren't fresh enough when I'm sort of putting all this together, and I lose track of what's loud and what's not. So using the meter is a really good way of getting me in the right ballpark, and then I can just tweak from there. Now, a system like this is good because it can expand with you as you start to do multiple templates. If you duplicate that template, a lot of your settings are going to go with you. So it's all going to start to work together in a seamless manner when you're doing sets live. And that's kind of the main consideration when you're playing live. You need things to be stable and always repeatable time after time. Now, live shows are probably still going to need you to EQ and think about your kind of general levels, depending on the room, the space, everything always sounds different. So for that, I would recommend setting up some master bus effects and maybe an EQ, etc. But that's probably for another video. As a little bonus, if you want the main takeaways from this lesson downloadable in a PDF, and perhaps you want to download my Loopy Pro template so that you can try this stuff out for yourself, there's a link down in the description below that sends you over to my community page where you can get access to both of those things. Now that's it from me today. If you found this useful, then please do hit that like button. It really does help me out and help this channel grow. But I'll see you in the next one. Take care.
I'm talking about the little things. Get my back off the show. Get my back up the show. Yeah, I'm talking about the little things that really get my bag up the show.